outside of our borders. As I promised on Thursday, we meet today to focus on our continuing adjustments to the return to what we call the new normal. And today I would indicate that it's a good time to begin to reflect on what we're doing, where we've been, and why we're doing it. You know, for me, this is almost surreal in that I remember my grandfather talking to me about epidemic year 1918, and it was like a story of a time so far away that I couldn't grasp it in the context of time, but I grasped it in the context of the horror of the event. And those of us who today are dealing with this issue would be in a position to talk to our children and grandchildren about this time and the horrors and the experiences. And when we do that, we will talk about the day when we saw New York on its knees, not being able to bury its dead. And we'll talk about an Italian city that was a ghost town a few weeks after migrants came in from China. We'll talk about the United Kingdom, where the situation was not much better. And we will talk about our neighbor in Brazil, where 800 people dead in one day is an experience that they are facing. We will talk about the days when there wasn't commercial aircraft flying. 95% of the thousands of planes in the world were on the ground. And we'll talk about those days when we shut the border down and nobody could come in and nobody could go out. But during that time in Trinidad and Tobago, we will talk about how we managed to react, close all our schools. Children couldn't go to school, teachers didn't go out, bars were closed, you couldn't get your hair cut, ladies couldn't get their hairdressing done, and of course all our commerce had virtually ground to a halt. And having taken those steps, which brought great hardship and pain to the population, that we managed to overcome it. As Prime Minister, I'm very aware of the negative effects and the sense of frustration and the experience of at least temporary poverty that many of our citizens have been driven into by the actions that we have to take. At home, I am very cognizant of the requirement for you to look good to get to the hairdresser, and how important that is to the ladies, because lobbyist number one is at home. And I am also cognizant of the need to have a beer with your friends by the local bar. And I'm cognizant of an empty wallet because a sole trader or a small business operator who is a single employee of the business and not been able to earn because we have had to shut down our activities. I am cognizant of that. I'm cognizant of the fear of members of a family being infected. I've had my own child in New York ever since. I have many relatives abroad in places of great harm. And I've seen people, nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, react to the loss of life abroad. Fortunately for us, our personal experiences here have been very limited. And for that, we have to be eternally grateful to some people in whom we have invested at an earlier time and who came to the party with their A game. Our healthcare professionals at every level. the government of Trinidad and Tobago got the best advice that was available in a timely and professional manner. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago managed the public business on the basis of total responsibility to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I can say that as we look to the post-COVID period, we will bring to bear on that period the same proficiency that we brought to bear on the threat's arrival. And when we do that, we expect that the best result that's available to the people of Trinidad and Tobago will be available in the post-COVID period as it was available in the pre- and during the COVID period. Next week, I expect to receive the work of that group of nationals, dedicated nationals, from many walks of life. Some retired, came out of retirement, some active, some PNM, some non-PNM, some Nowerian, some devotees. We all came together and we are all coming together. And even those who did not comply fully and ran afoul of the law because they wanted to party or they wanted to go on the beach, fortunately they were in the minority. The vast majority of people of Trinidad and Tobago focused on the threat that we faced. And I would like to say that they appreciated the advice that we were getting and the actions of the government in response to that advice. And today, if our country is recognized as number one in managing this affair, it is not the climate, it is not the weather, it is the advance of our professional staff, the advice of that professional body of staff, and the actions taken by the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago in response to a virus which was unknown to the human race until late 2019. We are very grateful to those countries that assisted us. China, the United Kingdom, the United States, and our Caribbean colleagues who cooperate with us in CAFA. We want to single out the staff of CAFA, which is located here in Trinidad and Tobago, who provided us with absolutely exquisite professional help and guided the heads of government and other decision makers in the Caribbean. We have been well served, and for that we should be proud. I know there are many of our citizens who can only acknowledge excellence if others first acknowledge it. You can be the best calypsonian in Trinidad and Tobago, but you get no recognition unless you sing in Carnegie Hall. You can be the best cook, but your fare would not be acknowledged unless some foreigner passed through and write about it in a foreign magazine. But I want to say that on this occasion, as a people facing this challenge, which the entire world was called upon to face at the same time, we in Trinidad and Tobago have come out of it so far equal to any and better than many. And for that, we should be satisfied and grateful. Today, I want to, as I've done before, advance the program that we laid out. You may recall that we had laid out a 7-phase draft program which we will be guided by. We had the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and it goes all the way where phase 7 was the opening of the borders. We have got through phase 1, we've got through phase 2, and today we are going to look at phase 3 and some elements of what we had as phase 4, because we are able, based on the data that we've had, to make some adjustments. But before I go any further, I would like to ask our health team, led by the Minister and our dedicated CMO, to give us the daily reports.
Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Ministers, members of the viewing and listening public. The clinical update for today, 30th of May 2020, is as follows. Tests submitted to CAFA and the UV lab, 3,131. Unique patients tested thus far, 2,691. Repeat tests, 440. Community tests conducted, 1,300. Positive tests remain at 116. Number of deaths remain at 8. Number of persons discharged remain at 108. Hospitalized patients at this point, nil. In the parallel system at present, we have 67 persons spread between 3 sites. The Debe Penal site has 59 individuals. At the Cascadia Hotel, there are 5 persons. And at the Home of Football, there are 3 persons housed. All the healthcare workers who have been precedingly at the Napa have now been discharged home, as well as 21 nationals from the Tacarigua facility were well and discharged to their homes on Thursday last as well. Prime Minister, that's my clinical update for today.
Thank you very much, CMO Parasram. Okay, so we did initially indicate that phase 3 would have started on June 5th and covered the window June 5th to June 19th. Today I'm pleased to announce that we are able, based on the data collection and the results that we've got, that we are able to move phase 3 forward to June 1st, which is Monday. So come Monday, we begin to reopen the public service. You may recall that we did have, at the very beginning, a system of essential services and non-essential. Those services that were deemed essential in the public service would have been functioning, but the non-essential services would have been in and are in house. So today, come Monday, 1st of June, the public service would be reopened. So it means that those who were deemed non-essential would now be required to come out to work. But they will do so not fully. They'll do so in a system where all the managers of the public service will be required to be out at work. So all persons who are in a position of management, and the head of the public service would be a little more precise with that by way of a circular memorandum on Monday. They will come out to work, and subordinate workers will come out on a rotational basis, come out every other day. So who comes out on a Monday will not come out on a Tuesday, and who didn't come out on a Monday will come out on the Tuesday, and we'll rotate until further notice. And we expect to do this into phase 4. So if you come out on Monday, you'll be required not to come out on Tuesday. If you don't come out on Monday, you'll be expected out on Tuesday. So we leave that up to you. So if you come out on Monday to meet your managers, your bosses, then you won't be expected to come out on Tuesday and on Thursday. But if you don't show up on Monday as a public servant, then you have to come out on Tuesday and Thursday, and then of course the following Monday and so on. So rotational time. And of course, as far as the public service is able to, during this period, we will encourage the use of virtual meetings at the management level and so on. If there are persons who have issues like childcare arrangements and so on, and they offer to do virtual work, I would encourage the public service to facilitate that. And of course, we would also encourage some flexi-time arrangements in the public offices so as to minimize the crowding of people on the roads and in the offices. Those options are available, and we would leave that entirely up to the managers of the various departments and the various offices. We also, on Monday, would open up completely all retail establishments. Now, this is a major sector because it covers all aspects of small trade, small business. You may recall when we did open up a while ago, we opened auto garages and tire shops, and we did not open motor car sales and trade. We opened up retail business. And we also had some restrictions on dental care and optometric care, ophthalmic care, physical therapy in pools, and occupational health therapy. All of that is now opened up from Monday, and if you want any further details in that, Doc can give us that a little while later on when the question time. Professional services, engineers, architects, surveyors, all these people are now available to come out on Monday. We would like to re-emphasize at this time, because we are into phase 2, we continue 50% capacity in public transportation, maxi taxis and registered taxis. They will remain under 50%. We open up malls, and all of these businesses would conclude their daily activity at 6 p.m. So we had that 6 p.m. restriction before on those that we had opened up. So these that we're opening up now, you open up until 6 p.m., which will give your employees time to get home within the window that we have been working with. So that is a whole body of people, a significant number of people who will be out to work on Monday going forward. And as we do that, we also, from Monday, the operations of the National Lotteries Control Board would be restarted. So those of you who feel lucky, as you're traveling on the pavement, socially distanced, spatially distanced, don't crowd the vendors, but try your luck as you would normally do. So because was it Playway and Lot. So anyway, NLCB business. The windows will be open from Monday, and gatherings will remain at 5. We have large numbers of people out in terms of the gross picture, but in terms of congregation, it still remains at 5 persons congregated anywhere, everywhere. With respect to the services to Tobago, we have been in communication with Caribbean Airlines, and Caribbean Airlines will, from Monday, expand its service to whatever is required as per bookings requested, and will run return services, getting back to close to what we used to have before. So getting to and from Tobago would no longer be restricted to a limited number of flights and limited number of aircraft, because remember we had started with 1 flight a day. As last Monday they went to 2 return flights. Come Monday there will be many more flights available, so you can begin. If you're in Tobago and you want to come to Trinidad, there'll be more flights available. And if you're in Trinidad and you want to go to Tobago, which is now your singular access to recreation, Tobago is wide open for business, and they would love to have you come to Tobago. And the minister, a similar kind of response will come from the port. So the connection between Trinidad and Tobago would be ramped up from Monday to some semblance of normalcy. Again, all of these opening up would be governed by the restrictions that would be spoken about a little later on, and the ones that you've been familiar with. They stay in place. The social distancing, the hygiene, cognizance and hygiene behavior, those things will stay in place. And of course, no mask, no service will also be in place as we go forward. So more people coming out, but there are still those restrictions in there. We will, with respect to the hotels, where hotels are able to offer outdoor dining on premises to residents, that would be permitted. Bookshops, great number of lobbying was going on there. I'm pleased to announce that the bookshops are open, so you can get your reading material, but as you go into the bookshops, no congregation in the shop. The shop would be open, but you need to be cognizant of what you're doing there. I mentioned malls before. Some malls have eating places in there, and those eating places were subject to no in-house dining, supply and leave. Take your supply and leave. That will still be in place in the mall as the mall is open to retail. I hope I'm making that clear. So business in the mall is normal shopping, but the business at the restaurant in the mall is subject to no in-house dining in that restaurant in the mall or any other restaurants, because restaurants are not. The reason why we are permitting the outdoor dining at hotels is because we are wanting to encourage the hotels that some have been open and running at great cost, providing a service to in-house people. And there's a great difficulty in feeding such persons because their restaurants, the inner restaurants are closed. So if they're able to do spatial services on the premises only for the guests inside, well then that should be permitted. Let me go across to phase 4, where I know there are anxieties, and just take you to where we expect to go in a week's time, which would be phase 4, which initially we had been expecting to be at phase 4 on June 20th. We're now looking at phase 4 on June 8th. That means the full public service should be out and operating but would continue so to do on the rotational basis. It means that your hairdressers, your barbers, and your spas would be open to you from June 8th. So one more week. And I think I don't want to take the responsibility for this. I would like to ask Dr. Parashar, when you get up again, explain, in fact do it now, explain why we are holding the line on this particular group of people for one more week.
So when we look at phase 4, hairdressers, spas, barbers, we're talking about persons that have very close contact to a large number of people for a consistent duration of time. So primary contact is defined as someone that would have contact with an individual for more than 10 to 15 minutes in a close space without social distancing. In these settings, as you can tell, it obviously meets that definition in terms of very close contact. Most procedures will take more than 10 minutes, and you have face-to-face contact in those instances. A lot of times when you're doing work on someone's face or hair, the person that is being worked on can't wear any mask, so you have that vulnerability as well. There's actual physical touching that occurs in a lot of these scenarios, as well as with spas in particular, there's enclosed settings which could be a highly contagious setting. So that's the rationale for leaving it into phase 4, Prime Minister, for that particular category.
Yes. But that's until June 8th.
Until June 8th, yes.
While you have the floor, could you speak to domestic workers,
sure,
housekeepers, maids and gardeners, particularly domestic workers, who will come out on the 8th as well?
So they are on the 8th of June as well in phase 4. Again, we have held our, with the stay-at-home order, we would not have allowed persons to come into our homes for quite a long period of time. Domestic workers would be the first category we are allowing to come into our home. So we were putting things in place when we leave our home to go where we have to go quickly and return home. Now we're asking for a category of worker that will be coming into our homes. In terms of particular types of work, we have intimate objects, toothbrushes, etc., that work is being done on, kitchens, bathrooms, our clothes that we would have washed. So there's physical contact with all those items, which we contact right after. So if someone is ill, if you can look at that scenario where someone is ill, and a lot of times people may go from one home to another home in a particular day. We had discussed the premise of super spreaders prior. So it is innately by the job that is being done and by the movement from one place to the next. Intimate relations with our utensils and our surfaces in our homes puts us at a greater risk. So we'd like that to be held for onto phase 4, so that we can have a look at the numbers and see what they look like before we make that jump.
Okay. Let me at this time, thank you, Doctor. Yeah. Let me at this time make a comment on 2 categories of people who we are very concerned about, because we had brought about by our actions significant job losses for people who was earning at the lower end of the earning scale, but for whom these jobs are very important in the community for these families, mainly women. Casinos and cinemas I've asked the CMO and his team and our medical team to reach out to the operators of the associations, the groups of these people, and to receive from them in very short order their proposal for workplace safety and bars as well, to be able in the next cycle that we would be able to consider the reopening of these establishments. But we want to ensure, because of the nature of their business, for example, it may be that you can open a casino without using roulette tables, but you can use the one-arm bandits because they can be exposed to some spatial control. Not that I'm familiar with those things, but we want to bring them back into operation, but we want to have some idea as to what protocols would be in place. So come next week, we'll do that, and based on the outcome of that exercise, we would be able to, at the earliest. My other area of concern is that some people are saying that we have been too far away from our places of worship, and some people are actually accusing others of being disconnected from God. I don't think that is so. I think all of us have been doing our personal connections, but our churches need to be reopened, and because of the history of the role that that kind of gathering had played in the earlier pandemic, and because of the nature of the business of gathering to worship in gathering, worship is good, gathering is bad. So we have to wait for a little longer, maybe one more cycle. But as I stand here now looking at the next cycle that was supposed to be phase 5, after phase 4, phase 5 was, we adjourned that up to come into effect on July 5th. As of now, we can take a decision to bring that up to June 22nd. So that's a full, almost 2 weeks earlier than we had planned. And of course, if the record remains as clean as it is up to that, the week before that, we might even come forward a little earlier. And that would bring us to be able to open up basically outside of the school system. That will bring us to open up the rest of the economy. That is pretty much, the school system is a little different, and that is the last block of activity that we're going to bring into operation, aiming for September. But so by the 3rd week of June, we should get back to loud praises in our cathedrals and elsewhere.
Hopefully not so loud.
Hopefully. I hope it would be loud. If the record is good. Again, all of this is predicated on the assumption that our numbers remain good. We trust and we pray that in this period that we are opening up the doors wider and wider, that we are not subject to that infection level, which is called a spike, attack back, the virus. If we keep going in this direction, we will be able to, and that same horizon we're looking at the opening up of our beaches and rivers and sporting activities by June 21st, providing everything is all right. So you can begin to plan to be spatially dispersed on our beaches, because you will, even as we open at that time, you will be required to not congregate, because it is the congregation that poses the threat, because it provides the bridge from one person to another. Once we carry that with us, and we all behave as though we're carrying the virus, and we don't want to offer it to somebody else, you put on your mask when you go out, and you do all the basic things you've been talking about for the last 3 months. I also have asked the team, led by the Minister of National Security, Minister of Health, CMO team, to look at the commercial repatriation of some more of our people who are outside. We have a stream of people on the outside who want to come in. We started very slowly. Well, initially we started with a no entry, and then we started very slowly. We want to move a little more aggressively to bring categories of people in. But I want you to understand that we still have to control that flow. The biggest threat to us now as a nation in responding to the virus is getting infected by an inflow of people from the outside into this population. While we empathize and we are moved by the stories on the news, that is not the basis on which we will make the decision at the border. We make the decision at the border based on how many people we think we can safely bring in, and be sufficiently managing the risk that if there is infection by persons coming in or by community spread here, that we do have the health infrastructure to cope with the numbers that could flare up. For example, we're bringing in our children from Jamaica and Barbados. That's how many? 270. 375. 275, approximately 300. By the time they finish telling you who's coming, it might be 300. One of the things that we have done in Trinidad and Tobago, which is you got to take note of, that mandatory quarantine that the state is funding is not commonplace. We bring you in, we put you in quarantine, and we fund it. But we also have to look at the number of rooms that are available in the system. We are going to move to a situation now where we try to bring people in, keep our eyes on the number of rooms available, and for those people who can fund themselves to get in quickly, we will cooperate a bit more with them, get them in, but against the background of how that has an impact on the rooms that are available. Because the rooms, there are different categories of rooms, and if you want to ask the questions at question time, Dr. Parson can go through, or Dr. Can tell you what the different categories of rooms are for, and I think now is a good time, Doc, to go over that again, because I see people saying, we have all these empty rooms, and why we can't bring everybody home. The rooms, one person in the system has a demand on a number of different categories of rooms, because you move them from one place to another, from an uninfected patient to that confirmed patient goes in another category, and that patient is recovering, goes to a post-confirmation period. So you would have seen the steps that we have taken. So the total number of rooms, the segregation allows you to use some rooms for some things, and it is the management of that determines the flow of people that we bring in. And as we bring them in, we are keeping an eye on what is happening in the country with the local population. Because if there's an upsurge in confirmations in the local population, who now are required to use the rooms that we have on reserve for them, then we certainly will have to reduce the number of people coming in. And of course, where they're coming from. Where they're coming from. If they're coming from heavily infested areas, common sense should tell us that we have to be super careful in the numbers we bring in from there. And on the other, the corollary of that is, if they are coming from St. Vincent, Grenada, Barbados, and even Guyana, where the numbers are such that they are relatively similar to ours, where there's no major apparent outbreak, we are now, this group of officers will come up, working with Caribbean Airlines, to come up with an arrangement for travel, and we'll take our first baby steps in arranging air transport for our citizens to come home, and then later on, if things keep going well, then we can begin to have CARICOM citizens from those quote-unquote clean territories who can come to us. But if they have opened their borders to the outside world, we have to think twice about opening our borders to them. But we certainly are on a trajectory to bring as many of our citizens home in as short a space of time as possible, but governed by the infrastructure available. Because when we bring those cruise ship people in, and we bring the students in, they alone would now put us in a position where most of the capacity that we have would have been used up, even though it's just quarantine. But why are we quarantining them? Because there's a possibility that the infection could arise among them. Right? I think I have said as much as I want to say on that, and I simply would ask the population to continue to be patient. We've said up front, it is not politics, it is patience. It is not voodoo, it is science. That approach has worked well for us. If your category has not been called today, I know there's some element of disappointment there, but remember why we're doing this. We're doing this to save lives and to be alive, to have an economy. So let's not put the economic activity in front. They said dead men tell no tales. Dead people don't go to work and they don't own a cent. So let us focus on why we're doing this. We have done well as a people. Let us not score half a point when there's a whole point to be scored. I'll open the floor. Is there anything you want to say at this time? Please do that.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So I welcome the opportunity again to talk about the parallel healthcare system so we could understand the numbers. So for ease of calculation, we have in the parallel healthcare system about 922 beds. So let's round it off to 1,000 just for ease of calculation to show that you can't bring in 1,000 people and put them in that system. The parallel healthcare system consists of different types of accommodation. You have hospital care accommodation, where people who are positive, who are ill, need to be hospitalized in that type of setting. Whether it's a primary healthcare facility, if you are mildly symptomatic, a normal adult, to the HDU, ICU type setting for the elderly who are very, very ill. So, at Couva, we have about roughly 200 beds. 200 beds. At Augustus Long, we will have about 50 to 60 beds. And at Cora, we have 100 beds. So that's 100, 175, 50, 225, 250, roughly for that type of hospital care setting. That is not to bring in people to be quarantined. I hope I'm making myself clear, right? Those are not quarantine facilities. What type of quarantine facilities do we have? Bearing in mind that quarantine facilities have to be used for both people we bring in and also step-down facilities for people who we want to decant from Couva, from Cora, to serve out the rest of their period of convalescence. So at Tagarigua, we have 48. At Sangre Grande, we have 36. Debe, we have 96. Home of Football, 86. Napa, we have 60, but which is put aside for healthcare workers. We are not using that to bring in people. Balandra, we have 70, and Tobago, we have 75. So roughly 1,000 in a parallel healthcare system, but it is spread across providing care for ill patients with COVID, providing convalescent facilities for people who we could take out of hospital, and for people like who came in from Barbados, we put them in Tacarigua. So it's not 1,000 beds available solely to bring in 1,000 people from outside. On top of that, I would have said several times, in the hospital care system, When you start to approach 80, 85% capacity, you will start to be considered at full capacity. So let's say Cora, you have 100 beds. When you start to approach 85% at Cora, you are starting to approach full capacity. And I said publicly, for infectious diseases like COVID, we are dropping that down to about 75%. So even though in Cora you have 100 beds, we may only occupy about 75 beds because you want to have proper spacing. So I hope we understand the numbers, the percentages we are playing around with. Yeah, and in quarantining, what we try to do, if you have one group from country A, we try not to mix them with another group from country B. So we don't want commingling. So that is why when we had those 33 from Barbados, we put them into Tacarigua. Even though they were spare beds, we were never going to mix them. When we had the group from Martinique, the first cruise ship group, we put all in Balandra. And even though the facility was never 100% occupied, it means there will be certain beds that will be in reserve because you don't want to commingle people. This is how you manage from a policy perspective, the bringing in of people and the treatment of your local positive cases and convalescent cases. What we will have to do moving forward, as we have more and more people coming in from the outside, is build out more and more capacity for quarantining. And that is what Minister Young, myself, and the CMO will be looking at from Monday. How do we build out more capacity outside of Couva, outside of Cora? Okay? So I hope the national population has some idea of what is the science and methodology and the numbers behind the parallel healthcare system. Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister. I think this is a good time for us to open the floor for questions. So if you have any questions, now is your time to pose them. Please, yes. Wait, she's before you.
Prime Minister, I didn't hear anything about the opening of daycare centers and preschools. Now, if you're asking people to come back to work, what measures are you going to, these workers are going to have in terms of support system if they are to return to work?
Well, that, as I said, those arrangements are we don't have a supply of daycare center infrastructure to hand out. Persons who are required to go out to work on a rotational basis would be required to make their own arrangements. And in where there are difficulties, we've left quite a wide opening for the managers, the bosses, to work out arrangements with them with respect to how they handle. And at the home side, that still would have to remain a personal decision as to how you have your children looked after, because we are very close to the vacation time. And there are systems in place where children are looked after during the vacation period. You may need to call that forward a little bit because we are about a month ahead of the school's vacation, the normal what vacation would have been. But the flexibility in terms of the persons who employ people need to cooperate with them with respect to whether they come in on flexi time, whether they take advantage of any other facility that might be available to allow them to cope with these challenges.
Be allowed to work at home? Is that arrangement being
I did say as far as they're able to encourage virtual work, providing the job allows it. I mean, not every job allows you to work at home. Some job requires you to be at a particular place. If your job is to turn a switch, you can't do it at home. But if it's doing work that can be done at home on your computer or something like that, then certainly that is to be encouraged. And of course, we can't go to a solution like bringing children to work because you don't want that. We just don't want that because we don't want the exposure. So it requires a certain amount of cooperation between, management and the staff to get most of this done.
What is the science behind the 6 p.m. closing time, especially for businesses like restaurants where people
It's the reduction in the congregation, and it's in the in the absence of a curfew. We need to get people home, because one of the things that the last thing on the list of to do here that is still in effect and would be in effect down to phase 7 is stay at home. Right? That is, if you look at the document we had prepared, you're still required to get in. We never used a curfew, but we from day one discouraging people from congregating, and if you finish at 6, most workers will get home between 6 and 8, and then we have people reducing their exposure to the rest of the population. It's a reduction of exposure, which is a requirement in dealing with the movement of the virus. The longer you are out, the greater is your exposure. So we come out for a few hours to get certain things done, and we go back to a place of safety, hopefully.
Just to support the Prime Minister, in fact, you have to realize also, the later down in the day you go and the work day is finished, the more relaxed you are. The more relaxed you are, the more you want to stay online and talk. Let's just get into the malls, get into the shops, do what you have to do. Get what you have to do and go home. The congregation after hours is what we are trying to avoid, to stop community spread.
I want to ask about funerals. Is there any consideration for expanding the number to maybe 10? Because it's difficult on people.
I know.
So is 10
But can we countenance that? 5 people in a funeral is hard.
It's very hard.
You want to go to 10?
With the CMO, let me ask one particular doctor. Dr. Chapman, what is your view? Can we now take a decision on allowing 10 family members to be at a funeral? I think we can. Dr. Parson?
The Prime Minister has asked.
Tell the country. Come tell the country what we're doing in that. It's most families, especially Tobago families, 5 people in a funeral is really hard. Yeah.
Honorable Prime Minister, other ministers, members of the media, viewing public, we feel just as you do. We have personally also have losses. People are managing funerals virtually also difficult. Funeral homes are allowing people to come in 5 at a time. So that number of 5 that is being purported is not actually the attendance at a funeral. So keeping that in mind and looking at the number of people that we are moving in this phase, we have asked that number 5 be held. And it's not only the number of people that we are moving, but it is also the different categories of people that we are moving. What we are trying to get is a new normal, and it is a difficult process. But Prime Minister, if it is that CMO is in agreement, and you as Prime Minister have asked, I cannot say no. But I want to underscore, and I want to take this opportunity to say that we are happy that we can move on, but we are unhappy with some things. Just as we are giving this, Minister Young knows where I am going. Prime Minister knows where I'm going. The compliance with masks have fallen down.
Yeah, I'll get to that. Thank you, Doctor. The reason why I'm an advocate for the 10 is that the grieving process, more than any other, requires that bonding at the parting. And therefore, if a group of 10 people can be allowed to gather at the same time for that purpose, it will bring a lot of emotional relief. So I would like to recommend that we allow 10 people to be at the cortege at the same time.
At an exception.
Yeah. And what, as an exception to the gathering of 5. And what Doc says there, what Dr. Trotman said is important, that you can have 20 people at the funeral, but the way managing it at the funeral is that they come in groups of 10. It's supposed to be a group of 5. There's a particular graveyard in Tobago. I get a report every time there's a funeral in there. Because people go in there, they start out at 5 outside, and by the time they get to the graveside, you have 50 people. Congregation at the graveside. And it is difficult to police every single location, every single event. But I think some element of relief to the grieving would be brought by going to 10. But we still want to ask people, minimize your exposure. Minimize your exposure.
Prime Minister, Dr. Trotman ended off by saying there's a drop in the compliance of wearing masks. What, if anything, can or should, will be done about this?
Well, the one thing we tried to do when we adopted mask as part of the response was to say, no mask, no service. We will be able to say to those persons coming out to work in the public spaces, public servants coming out to work, that they would be required in public spaces where the public is using the space to ensure that they are covered. And we will continue to appeal to, we do not see a solution of legislating this. It is just that we have to keep working on people to stop being cavalier. And if it is that we're saying that we cannot be made to comply, it may very well be that it would take something drastic for people to comply in this country. I've discussed this with the Attorney General. I've discussed the logistical aspect of it. There's no point in making a law that you can't enforce. I think because you are required to behave at the personal level, we have to keep talking to each individual on every occasion that you are required to protect other people as they protect you. Because the mask really does not prevent you from getting infected. It prevents you from passing it to other people. It prevents other people from polluting your space. That's what it is. I look at the people running around the savannah, and you see about 40% of the people around the savannah complying with a mask on their face, meaning that if they exhale microbes into the air that somebody's going to run through in the next 5 seconds, that they would have controlled that pathogen within that mask. But on the other hand, you see other people running and panting and blowing like a racehorse, passing people on the road. They don't care what happens. And then you say maybe there ought to be a law that that person should what? Be arrested. And then what you do with such a person? You take them up to fill up the jail, or to take them to get bail. But it's just not a solution. The action is so simple that it is difficult to police it. So the next thing is to appeal for more personal responsibility, and literally don't encourage people around you who ought to be covered to remain uncovered. There ought to be a frowning on that kind of behavior. That's all I can recommend at this stage. I wouldn't tell you that we will make it illegal to not have a mask. We discussed it at length. Yeah. We discussed this at length with all the people involved, and we came to a conclusion that it is not enforceable. Maybe if things were worse and the mask was an absolute requirement, because it is not. It is part of a process of response. Some people, there's one member of parliament who insists, his position is that the mask, wearing the mask is foolishness. He's a medical doctor. Because some people believe that the mask, because the microbe is so small and can get through the fabric, what you're wearing it for, you can inhale it anyway. But on the other hand, the main reason is that you cannot easily, or you may not easily, blow whatever you're blowing out of your system into the air for other people to pick up. So the mask physically has a role to play in the many things that we do in responding to the viruses. Just like some people saying, I'm going to respond, and some say, I'm not going to respond. That's what it is. Some people simply just don't give a damn. Because it may very well be, but that's how they conduct their life in this country. Take no responsibility for anything. We have those, you know. Take no responsibility for anything. And blame everybody else for the condition of their life. You know, people in this country have good opportunities in their youth, disregard it, waste time, then get to their old age, and then start to fight the government over an increase for old age pension. And then you ask yourself, is that what you have done? Because opportunities were available. You make education available across the board for all our children. I'm sure you know some of them who could not be bothered to try to get themselves educated. But you can't force education into anybody. At the end of the day, it boils down to personal responsibility in many, many areas. And when it gets down to that, it boils down to character, because character matters. And that's what it is with the wearing of a mask at this time and in this situation.
Prime Minister, if you allow me to support you in the wearing of masks. When we open up retail and malls on Monday, we need to start a conversation with the owners and operators of malls, the owners and operators of stores, all the bookstores that were clamoring to be opened. Now this is your opportunity to insist that when people come into your stores that you have now gotten opened, are you going to be part of the solution to insist that your customers wear a mask? Every bookstore that harassed, contacted, cajoled, went to the media to be opened, you are going to be open on Monday. Are you going to do the responsible thing and ask your customers to wear a mask? Malls. There are two types of malls: open-air malls, closed malls, covered malls. Mall owners from Monday should have at their entrances, I think, people with sanitizers, provide masks, and your store owners should insist on what the Prime Minister has been saying. No mask, no service, moral suasion. Be a part of the solution. Don't leave it to the government to pass a law. That is not we can't lock up people for not wearing a mask, not washing hands. But the personal responsibility now at the level of the store owner is what is going to save us now. So I am appealing to every sector of retail that has been clamoring to be opened. Now is your opportunity on Monday to partner with us and do simple things. Provide a sink, provide water, insist your customers wear a mask. And I'm pleading with mall owners, store owners to do that.
But there's one thing that you, for those who believe that there's no force of law, if a business place, even a small one, is observed to be facilitating congregation beyond 5, a passing police officer can shut that place down. Just remember that. So as you open your business, if you disregard the requirement for an absence of people congregating, the police officer has the authority to close the place on the basis that it is facilitating congregation. And congregation beyond that number of 5 is a violation of the Public Health Act. So if you have customers, a simple civil conversation to spread out, wait outside for a moment until somebody come out, then if you do that, then you are complying with the law. If they all rush to the counter at the same time, a passing police officer can intervene to enforce the Public Health Act. And we do have, I presume, I hope I know we have many more public health inspectors out there. So let's not have them having to come and tell you to close your door because you couldn't be bothered to observe that simple requirement to not have people congregating, especially in a small space. If you have a larger space, then you can have more people in there, and they spread out in there. Supermarket, you're in the aisle, stay away from people, let them have their way on the shelf, you come close after, and if you have to gossip, gossip loudly so we all can hear what you're saying.
Prime Minister, I just want to clarify what you just said there about the police able to enforce this law. These malls and they are not public spaces per se, they are private entities operating or offering services to the public.
Once the public has access to the malls, it becomes a public space for the purpose of that law.
I want to go to the Minister of Health. Two things I want you to update us on: the $5 million masks. What's the latest with that? And the public health officers that were supposed to be trained. What's the latest?
Sure.
With that?
So the masks are being done under the auspices of NIBDEC, so the Minister of Finance will have to give you the update. What I could tell you, I was at the offices of FEEL yesterday. FEEL is the agency that the Ministry of Health partnered with to give out free masks. Yesterday I was told they have given out to date 100,000 masks around the country. So there's 100,000 people being served with masks from FEEL alone. That is outside of the normal. Yeah, one mask per person. So 100,000 people, and these are reusable masks. These are masks that you could wash and reuse. These are not disposable masks. The other, and I thank you for the question. So the permanent secretary, we have come up with a job description for those extra 50 people, the third-year UWI students. UWI has signed off on it, and the list of these students was supposed to come to the PS on Friday. I don't know if it has come, but it is on track to get done. Thank you.
Payment enumeration for them?
That is being worked out administratively. I don't have that detail here.
Could I ask about the opening of borders for people who want to leave? I heard you spoke about CAL, but I seem to get the sense it was only with reference to travel to Tobago, between Trinidad and Tobago. And also, Minister, you had spoken about consolidating quarantining on a ship. I don't know what this means.
Okay, thank you. First of all, as we've indicated, and we are receiving applications for exemptions for persons to leave Trinidad and Tobago, and that has been facilitated. Right now, the main flights that are doing it are repatriation flights by various governments. So the Canadians, the US, the UK persons. As you are aware, right now we have not agreed to the reopening of commercial flights because, of course, that brings a whole new difficulty, and that's what the Prime Minister is indicating. We are looking at it, the team of the Minister of Health, the CMO, and myself, and that will come in time. But right now, there is no reopening of commercial flights to leave Trinidad and Tobago, right? With respect to the cruise ships, and I'm glad for that opportunity, we are in communication with the remaining cruise ship companies. As at this stage, I cannot even give 100% accurate number because with every communication, we're getting different numbers. One of the things concerning us, and yesterday, and it was confirmed this morning, we got confirmation from one of the cruise ship companies that they're willing to use one of their vessels to assist us with the quarantine process. But we have a concern. You would have seen or heard by now that just recently in St. Vincent, there were 8, after the PCR tests, persons who have been confirmed with COVID. Of course, we have our experience with the cruise ships and COVID, so we're very cautious with that. So one of the discussions we're having right now is if the ship comes in, we will be decanting persons from the ship to on land for us to use the system you've heard the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health refer to, which is an on-land system, taking persons off the ship in batches. That requires a lot of management. So I'd like to add to what the Prime Minister said. It is not only the 273 students, but we're looking at between 360 to over 400 workers on cruise ships. So immediately we're getting up into the 600 range that we would want to bring on land, even if we're using a cruise ship initially. And then each person has to be tested, etc. So it is a logistical exercise. The being on the cruise ships is not going to solve the problem of the quarantine because we will have to decant them in batches. And then, of course, the science is that a person may not present on the 14th day, and then if one person presents on the 13th day, then you still have to ring fence the other persons who were in that batch, etc., as we learned from those who were up at Palandra. So it's a continuous ruling. We have the logistics of then working out how many we can facilitate and take into Trinidad.
And that's why earlier I said we have to try to build out now more online, on-land facilities, not hospital-based, but quarantine-based. So that is what we will be engaged with over the next couple of days.
And I just want to clarify, horse racing and betting shops, that's with casinos, or is that with NLCB?
No, that NLCB is in law. There's a National Lotteries Control Board, so that doesn't fall in there, Prime Minister.
So that's the next phase.
I don't see that we've cleared the horse racing.
No, not today.
Need to point the mic, Prime Minister. The mic.
Yeah, we have not given clearance for horse racing to recommence, but I know that there's the Minister of Trade looking at the possibility of giving notice. Now that we are getting to this point in this cycle with respect to the health condition, because we are close to being able to point to a period when horse racing can resume, because there are two aspects to that. One is the congregation, and the other is the handling of animal health.
Correct.
There's an animal health component there as well. So hopefully in the next, when we in about the other
2 cycles.
in the other by the 15th of June, I know there was some event that they wanted to have this Labor Day, right? Labor Day is on the 19th of June, and if that is not cleared now, I think all indications are that it will not be cleared in time for that, unfortunately.
Ria, just before we go, we must learn from other countries that had to slingshot back into the past. South Korea took a decision to open schools, but because of reinfection, what happened? They had to close schools. We are trying to avoid that by taking very careful, strategic steps, so when we open something, we don't get a massive infections and then we have to slingshot back in the past and lock down again. There are so many lessons to be learned from abroad that we are learning. We are paying attention to it. And that is why so far we have not had to go back and reimpose measures, because we have been careful, we have been strategic, and we have resisted a lot of pressure. But we are doing this in the interest of the health of the country, balancing between economic activity, health, job creation, and all that. And so far, we have done well.
Minister Young, have you received any communication from the Cricket West Indies regarding CPL being hosted in Trinidad and Tobago, and I think it's 4 Trinidad and Tobago players going to Antigua?
What I can see without fear of contradiction is at minutes to 1 this morning, the Prime Minister emailed to me a missive from Cricket West Indies, and I have immediately put in place that I reached out to the CEO of Cricket West Indies this morning, asking for them to provide us with the details for the Trinidad and Tobago players. They want to go on that tour to England, and it will be facilitated. So we're in that process. That has begun. We've reached out to Cricket West Indies. The CPL part, I'll leave to the Prime Minister.
We don't have a proper handle yet, but we are cautiously optimistic. If the CPL authorities would like to host the tournament in Trinidad, we have heard from unofficial sources that there are conversations that a tournament, all components of it, can be held. They're looking at all that in Trinidad. If that comes to us from the official sources, we have cleared the pathway for that conversation, and we would facilitate as we are able to under the confines of the CMO's guidance. So we'd be happy to host it within the confines of what we're doing here. But there are some serious logistical arrangements, because we will want to preserve our environment, and that tournament will involve a number of persons coming into Trinidad and Tobago. Now, if you come into this country, you have to go to quarantine. So until that arrangement changes, we if the intention is to have the tournament during the time when coming in means going into quarantine, well then obviously we can't do it. But if the tournament is scheduled for a time when that mandatory quarantine is not on the table, then we can do it.
And what I could add, Prime Minister, is not insurmountable. So the CMO and myself have been working, for example, with some sectors in the oil and gas sector. That once they satisfy us outside of Trinidad and Tobago, they've quarantined for a 14-day period, they've provided the test results. So there are ways, there's flexibility with respect to it, but always being guided by our medical public health experts.
And not only that, we will use the tour of West Indies to England to look at the playing conditions. So, for instance, you can't shine the ball with spit again, right? So we'll be paying attention to the playing conditions being developed now. This tour of West Indies to England will give us a template to look at to see how we can manage the on-field application of cricket to CPL.
Yeah, but if you've seen the number of hurdles they had to cross to get 2 teams to play, a tournament in Trinidad and Tobago involving the teams of CPL, with players coming from all over the world or from all over the region, that creates a more complex arrangement.
For sure.
Because if they're coming from areas where there are problems, and right now, virtually everywhere in the world has a problem, we have to be careful that we don't, but we want to look at it positively, and we will. But as of now, we don't have formal requests to do that.
I just want to be clear, no group sport is allowed at present.
No group sports, contact sports, not allowed.
Prime Minister, the opening of the public service, what, if anything, was put in place to make sure that the workers are safe and the public as well? Spacing issues, screens?
The public service management will have to comply with the protocols as directed. What applies to the business sector will apply to the public sector. So, whatever.
These things have already been done.
If I may add, there was a presentation done to the PSs a few weeks back. They would have gotten copies of all our guidelines as it relates to offices. And through the PSs forum, we are continuously having conversations to determine basically how they're going to operate in the new normal. So that conversation is a fluid one. It goes on between the Ministry of Health as well as the other PSs. From time to time, we're looking at screening of workers at the entry point, spatial arrangements of different office spaces. Flexi time, of course, as Prime Minister would have indicated, plays a part together with alternating days as well as the meetings via electronic media will play a great part in ensuring that there's no great congregation and there's no possibility or little possibility of spread.
So we are fully ready for opening on
I mean, I don't think any organization can be fully ready, but we're trying to mitigate the risk as best as we can. Critically, of course, one of the critical components is that if someone is ill, that they are not allowed into the space. And that's the main premise of it. And we're starting to do the entry screening as well, taking a history, checking for fevers upon coming to work, which is a big part of the whole process.
Samuel, as I have you there, 2 quick questions to you. There was a drive-in cinema that was supposed to open sometime this weekend that was shut down. Will you allow for that type of gathering?
A drive-in cinema in Trinidad?
Yeah, well, there's a car park that was supposed to show a movie, and they were advertising on Facebook. I believe it was, something like that.
I believe it poses a slightly lower risk than a regular cinema. However, I think we leave it to that phase before we make that decision, take that decision.
So that would be breaching regulation, gathering of 5 in a public space.
Okay, yes.
But I just wanted to tell you that Fuad Abubakar was on Facebook Live this morning, and he was saying that his father was approached by the PNM to get their assistance to win certain marginal seats, and his screening for the Port of Spain South constituency was part of that arrangement.
I don't know what this love affair with this story is about, but let me just say, from this very podium, I indicated how people are screened in the PNM's process and who can and cannot be a candidate. So I'm not getting involved in fantasy.
Just a follow-up question, Prime Minister. We were told that Mr. Mervyn Dillon's candidacy was rescinded. Can you shed any light on that?
I am not discussing P&M screening here today. We haven't, this is not the place and time for that. That process is still underway, and I say no more at this time.
I have a question for you, Prime Minister. As you
That sounds like a special question.
No, it's not a special question. Pandemic leave. I know you would have.
I know it was a special question.
You touched on it a couple of weeks ago, and now you're speaking of alternating days and staying home and whatnot. A lot of people are fearful that they have used up all their leave, and now they have nothing left. What of pandemic leave?
This pandemic leave concept never really kept pace with the other changes that we've made, and we've done a whole lot of things that did not make this overall pandemic leave a requirement. As a matter of fact, the concept was open to total abuse. What we have done, put in place arrangements which give tremendous flexibility and leeway for persons to stay at home or come to the workplace. That is not a title that contributes right now to what we're doing.
The concern raised was that there are some people who had to stay home because of their children, young children, no support system, and they used vacation, sick leave, and all their leave. And they were hoping that pandemic leave would reimburse them with some sort of leave later on in the year.
Why I've asked the Prime Minister to intervene is because the concept, as the Prime Minister said, pandemic leave is no longer active before us, but it is at the Finance and General Purposes Committee. We are looking at paid leave that is approved, so approved leave where the permanent secretaries and the other heads of the department may approve leave in certain circumstances. And where it is currently is we've sent it to NATOC for their comments, so we're making sure there's the widest possible consultation on it, and we're waiting the return of NATOC's position for us to determine, but it continues to evolve, but we will do what we have to at the government level.
What we have done, well, in the public service at least, the private sector has another arrangement there, but we have given leeway for persons to, operate and find relief. We've given a lot of leeway here, and we will do something that allows persons to access leave officially.
Correct.
What had bothered me in particular and the rest of the cabinet was the potential for abuse that any blanket pandemic leave operation would have brought about. This is a good time for me to wrap this up by extending greetings to all. Today is Indian Arrival Day, and we need to reflect on where we are, who we are, where we've come from, and most importantly, where we are going. So, happy Arrival Day to all of us, and let us cherish these memories of our survival and our successes. You said you had one more question as the last question.
Depending on the answer, I may have a follow-up. You said that the reason for not opening up the barber shop and nail salon because of the close contact, but dentists and ophthalmologists, and they also have the same.
That's a medic. It's part of the essential service to start with in the initial run, and that's the distinction between the two. The levels of infection prevention control training and the type of work that they do, they always have to have personal protection and IPC measures in place. So that's the difference between the two, to the most part.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your holiday.